Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the webcast, Just Sales. Today, I have the honor and privilege of talking to Professor Regis Lemmens from just across the border in Belgium. Regis is a PhD scholar, a published author, and the founder of a sales consultancy called SalesCubes. He is also spreading the knowledge on sales to young talents in Belgium in two premier institutions, Solvay Business School as well as Antwerp Management School. Regis, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and the audience.
It's a pleasure, Deva. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Regis, so one of the things, I know that you and I go back quite some time, but I know that you've always taken a kind of the fact that salespeople need to be more and more entrepreneurial in their way they do things. But one of the new things that you're talking about, and you're doing a lot of workshops these days, in this idea of design thinking in sales. Tell us a little bit more about what design thinking is and what was your journey towards this topic in sales.
All right. I'll start perhaps with the journey, and then I'll explain what it is. And the journey was 12 years ago, I started the research project. What's the future of sales? Where are we going to? What's the place of sales versus marketing, etc. And what we came up with, well, if you remember, we talked about it, was about value co-creation. Salespeople need to co-create, rather instead of creating a solution for a customer. The next step is creating the solution with the customers, doing it together. Now that sounds all very nice and it's very conceptual. And you quite quickly got the question from sales managers saying, this is nice, we adopt the idea, but what do we do? How do you do this? And so I started working with the metaphor of the doctor and the architect. And the way I present it is saying, well, what the customer expects of you is very often, let's say 80% of the time, to be a doctor. And a doctor, you go there when you're sick, you know what you want, what you need. You go and see them, he makes a diagnosis, he understands the problem, and then he fixes it, and he brings you the solution. And that's what most of us as salespeople do. We go and fix problems for customers. However, if you go and visit an architect, it's kind of different approach. They're not going to ask you what your problems are. Well, they may ask you, but they're really more busy. But where do you want to go? How do you see yourself? What are your dreams? And they start understanding about, who are you? What's your family? Do you have a car, 2 cars? Do you have a dog? Do you have kids? They really try to understand who you are. And in the next meeting, they don't come with a solution. They come with options. They come with different plans. We've got different ideas, and they present it to you. And then you look at the good and the bad things in each of these options. And based on that, then they will start working towards the final solution. And for those of you who've gone through this process, I challenge you is that the idea that you had about your house when you started the process with the architect and the final plan, it's very different.
Yeah.
It's very different. So what is amazing is that these architects are able to inspire you, challenge your thinking, get you new insights in what you actually really want, and help you to come up with expressing, this is what I would like. And that's what we need to do 20% of the time. Help your clients also, inspire them, make them see things differently, and together with them create visions, roadmaps for the future.
I think I really like this, because before you get into that journey, I think it's very interesting that every time I think about the metaphor of the architect, I'm thinking about how you go in with the budget in mind, and then essentially the budget might balloon. But the idea, as long as you are in control and you think that it's necessary for you, I think that would be acceptable. The reason why I'm saying is that a lot of times when clients come in, especially in a B2B situation, they think this is a budget, but a lot of times that budget might not be accurate given the solution that is needed for either to achieve or address a pain point or achieve an ambition that they want. So this architect approach might actually be very, very good, especially when the customers are not necessarily having a very clear-cut problem, but they do know that something's coming up. So, which is very interesting, because which means in the traditional way of qualifying your customers with another BANT methodology, budget, authority, need, and time frame, might already be flawed, because the budget by itself cannot always be predetermined, because the solution might be different depending upon the customers. I think it's very, very interesting from the viewpoint. So I just thought I would add this, because
you're right.
There's a lot of critique on the idea of even BANT, and saying if every B2B sales process is complex, now this qualification of budget authorities, the fact is that what is the budget we're talking about? Is this the budget for a kind of a standardized solution that you've done for other companies in the past, and then use that to say, okay, this is the budget, and can these people afford it? Whereas what you're saying here is that if we take the architect approach, right, but it could also be a doctor, right, saying that if I go for a routine checkup and I find something abnormal, I could come up with 4 options for treatment.
Yeah,
You know,
I usually tell my students is, an architect, you want them to be creative. When the doctor starts being creative, that is not good.
It's an interesting point.
That is not good news.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't want that. Yeah.
So please go on. Sorry, I just interrupted. You were talking about you were doing that, and then how did it lead design thinking? Yeah.
To pick in on your idea of the budget, I think also when you come in with a budget is because you think this is how much I want to spend for this kind of solution. You already have this idea. Of course, if then the solution changes and you realize what I want is actually completely different, people will find ways to either we roadmap it more into smaller parts. There are ways to redesign budgets, because the budget is basically based on a preconceived idea. And once you go through this architect approach, you will probably end up with a different idea.
Absolutely.
That's not bad, actually.
But I think that's if I completely buy into what you're saying, which then means that the authority part becomes very critical, because when you're, as an architect, I should be presenting these ideas to the key decision maker, because they might be the ones controlling the budget. So well, the budget in the BANT methodology, whereas the budget could be something where that could vary, but speaking to the right people becomes extremely critical, because as an architect, you do this and you show it to the, let's say, for example, kids, and they said we want a big playroom, and it balloons the budget, and then later on the people who actually control, or the banks, come in and say no thank you. But so from that viewpoint, I think it's very interesting in terms of seeing this approach that you're talking about might also have repercussions for how we also do the sales process itself.
Yeah, the way I position it is usually, and I'm starting it now, but I'm coaching a company doing it, is in the beginning of the year. But that's why I'm saying it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time we continue being the doctor. We're going to solve problems for clients. But 20% of the time is really about, let's have a break. Let's sit down, and where do you want to go as a customer? What are your plans for the next 12, 18 months? And let's see how we can help you to get there. And that's going to be the conversation. So it's important that we position that. It's very often, for instance, I tell salespeople, bring your manager to the meeting, because that is a clear signal to your client. This is not a normal meeting. This is not about selling. This is not about problem solving. We're going to talk about something different. How can we partner more, and how can we co-create something for the future? So that's really important. Otherwise, if you imagine going to a doctor and you're sitting in front of an architect, you'll be really surprised. So it needs to be framed correctly.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that's usually the metaphor that I use. And what's important in that is that a doctor works in problems and solutions. An architect works in dreams, ambitions, and options. So it's quite different. And for those who know spin selling, it's basically traditional sales is based around solving problems. And design thinking is taking it from a different perspective. We're not going to talk about problems. We're going to talk about your dreams, your ambitions. It's more strategic. Where do you want to go? and how can I help you to be there? So I often explain to salespeople is that the traditional, dear customer, what keeps you awake at night is not the topic here. Now it's not, it's more about where do you want to go and how can I help you to get there? That's the discussion. And now, of course, we come to the practical side, is that the people then ask me, okay, it's great. How do we do it? How do we do it? And so this is where we come actually to design thinking. So we went back actually to see what designers, how do they do it actually? What's the process of designing something? And so we came to the process of design thinking and discovered actually about 10, 12 years ago, how this process works and how it could be mapped into sales, which is not obvious. It's not obvious. And so how do we do this? But very quickly, I would invite everybody to look at an exercise online. You can find it. It's called the Wallet Project. It's from Stanford. Okay. And I do this with my students. So I basically take them 2 by 2 and I said, you know what, for 20 minutes now, you're just going to play a game. You're going to be, you're employed by Louis Vuitton and you have to design a wallet for your neighbor. And the Wallet Project, you can download it. It's the whole step-by-step process. It takes you through these steps, but it starts with an interesting idea. It starts with the first exercises. Start designing a wallet for your colleague next to you. And you can see people really looking like, I don't know, what could it be? And they get really uncomfortable and they start designing stuff. And then after 3-4 minutes, I said, stop it now, put the idea on the side. And now we're going through the process, meaning take your wallet out, analyze it, discuss it. Why are these pictures in there? Try to understand who that person is behind that wallet. And then start designing not 1, but 5 different options, and then present them to each other. So that's the idea. What's interesting is after we've done that, I stop. I don't do the whole exercise, as you can download it. I stop after the 5 options. They present it to each other. And then I ask everybody, what would you design now? Would that be the same idea as that you had in the beginning? And normally it's not, completely different. And I said, why do you think that is? And then I explained to them, I said, you know, in sales, what we often do, and we all do it, is like, I have a meeting with this client tomorrow. What could we suggest to them? What product could we sell to them? What could be our next opportunity that we could do with them? And so we start thinking straight into problems and solutions. But that's not a creative process. You're very limited in what you're going to come up with. Whereas if you go through the design steps, first empathy, analyze, trying to understand the meaning of what they're doing, and then you come, guys, do you see how many ideas you've got now? So that's the insight I want to get them. I said, listen, it's not about us thinking in a small room with the client. No, we go and talk to them. We tell them up front, we're not coming to sell you anything. We're coming to learn about you. Sorry.
No, Regis. No, I think so would you, that's what I really like, right? So for example, you could go in as a doctor, but then turn out to be an architect too, right? Because you know what I mean? So I could go in as a doctor, I could look at the pain points, but then I could start thinking like an architect and saying, okay, now to help solve this pain, what are what I mean? Is that a possible? So of course there are not dreams there, but the idea is that there could be dreams in pain too. That imagine a pain-free world as against moderate pain. You could also have options there. So would you then say, because at the end of the day, it's going to be so hard for you to find those customers who are willing and patient, right? Because if I'm listening to you, you need customers who are also willing to meet you halfway, correct? In terms of giving you that information, giving you that access, right? So wouldn't you then say that in the practical deployment of this is you need your salespeople to be 60% doctors and 40% architects, because even the solution for the pain could also be various options, which, you know what I mean? Where do you take a stance on that one, just in terms of, we can take a look at this,
Okay, because it's about trust, you meet halfway. The customer's going to tell you all about their dreams, their ambitions. They will only do that if they trust that you can help them to get somewhere. Otherwise, why would I do this? So if you do this approach with the prospect, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult.
Okay.
Because trust is not there at the beginning for you to do it. So you have to be a doctor, earn the trust, and then they will see. So that's for sure. You say 60-40, I say 80-20. I usually it's an add-on. It's not one or the other. The difficulty is, and that's the difficulty, is to be both. So you have to clearly separate them and say, now I'm coming to solve problems, now I'm coming to think strategically. If you combine them, is extremely, you can, but it's very difficult.
Indeed.
Yeah.
No, sorry, no, I love this. No, I'm just thinking, sorry, please. Sorry for
So when does it happen that you do this in a normal doctor mode and you end up, that is often, you can do it very often when you're sitting with the client and you see what they need, what's the problem they're describing and how they want to solve it. You may want to, normally we do that, good salespeople ask, but what is it that you're actually trying to achieve?
Indeed.
And very often, and even us, as academics, when we meet with companies that want training courses and you ask them, what are you trying to achieve? You very often know that that's not going to help. That's not going to work. No. Well, you ask them now, it's not going to achieve that. And so then suddenly you've got to change your hat and put your architect hat on and say, wait. Let's go back to what you want to achieve and understand well, and then we're going to come back with options about how we can do this.
Indeed.
But that means in the middle of a meeting, you change your hat, you change strategy from solving something to, no. Let's analyze first and help them.
Indeed. No, I love this, Regis, because one of the things when I do, and it's an interesting thing, right? But we come from different places, but maybe we may be hinting at the same thing, right? Because when I do spin, right? There are many things, but the one I like is spin, but I call it SPAIN. That is situation, problem, aspiration. I think that's what you call ambition. So essentially what I say is that, right? I call it Spain because what I tell the students today is a lot of times, and we talked about this when the roles were flipped and you were talking to me about the future of sales, and essentially if you have to believe the numbers, and right now the latest study I think by LinkedIn says that there are going to be 66 activities by the sales organization before they get a qualified lead or something to that effect. That's the latest work.
Okay.
So, and if that is the case, I think that the salesperson of the future should be both a doctor and an architect, in terms of how, yes, they have to confirm and do the roles and what is being done, but they should also help the customer also look at the aspirations as well. Why are you doing this and what is it ultimately? And that's exactly what you just said in terms of doing it. And the question, of course, is that this is time consuming, correct? Because that's one of the things when you say that, isn't this time consuming? And you'll see why, because you cannot do this with every customer because you'll be spending an inordinate amount of time on every. So what are your thoughts on that?
And there's no guarantee of an outcome.
Yeah.
There's not necessarily going to come up with something that is, no. What we do there, because you remember you talked about it in the introduction about entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
What I like is when you look at the principles of effectuation theory, one of the principles, and I really like it, is that you don't plan how much you're going to earn, you plan how much can you afford to lose, to spend. And so when I get the question, Regis, what is this going to generate in terms of revenue that we do this approach? I said, no, I don't know. But I can tell you how much it's going to cost you. And then you can actually say which customers are worth this. Which are the customers that you find they're worth the efforts of really trying to find out what their strategy is and how we can help them. And that's where you invested in it. So you have to look at that way. If you come in with the mindset, I'm working on a project right now, I'm teaching next week, it's an insurance company. And the problem is, the mindset is, how can we close the deal? And it's not going to work. If that's your mindset in this approach, in the architect's approach, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Indeed, right. But this raises much more, because I know that one of the areas that you work a lot on is change management. And for me, I love the idea that all the things that you are doing are kind of interconnected, right? The way I look at it is that yes, you're going to be looking at effectuation. For those who are not familiar, is a term that is pretty much used in the entrepreneurial literature. If you try and take a look at, but what is very interesting is that when these things happen, when I have to be an architect, my sales process might be longer, right? Might suddenly involve more number of people. You never know how many people you will actually need. So your typical CRM systems then your typical sales process goes for a toss, because your CRM systems are based on kind of a structure. I'm not saying not all of them. You have very specific things in place, but then managers need to also be cognizant of the fact that when my salespeople say this is a kind of customer with whom I'm taking the architect approach, the way they have to be evaluated and trained is going to be quite different, and compensated as well, than the people who are actually doing the more doctor approach, correct? In terms of how you're looking at it.
When it comes to CRM systems, the way I present it is that you have to see design thinking and all this co-creation approach as part of relationship building, as part of the account planning. See it as a plan part. Out of that plan will come opportunities, but don't see it as part of the opportunity itself. Okay, so you look at which clients are worth it for us to put the investment in. For those, you start the process of strategically think with them, use design thinking as a method to guide you, and then you see what comes out of it. And sometimes, be honest with you, nothing comes out of it. There's no immediate opportunity. However, you've shown the client that you are really wanting to be a partner with them. This is really the trusted partner. You show them, I'm helping you to think things through, and then we see what happens. But I've yet to come across one case where there was no business afterwards. Perhaps not immediately there was no immediate opportunity, but there's always been one. And if I may one thing, because one thing I really like is when I do the wallet example, which I presented earlier, design a wallet for your neighbor. Very often, when I see these people later, I have people telling me, you know what? I went to buy a new wallet last weekend. And it's because, the whole process got me thinking about my wallet the whole time, that I realized I need a new wallet. And I really like that, because I tell my students, I say, a lot of you will probably go shopping for a wallet next weekend. And even though today you might not think you need one, you will. So what it means is that it shows you how going through this process is not only helping you to think, to sell, to understand the other person, but as a client, it helps you to structure your ideas and to realize, get new insights about what you want. So please don't forget that through this process, your client is going to change. Their thinking is going to change. And the value, because I'm often asked about, I don't bring anything, or you bring a lot. You help your clients to structure their ideas. You help them to get new insights, and they will value you for that.
Indeed. And that's very interesting, right? Because I think irrespective of whatever you do, value is created, whether it leads to immediate business or not, is a different story. But you're also creating goodwill amongst the people who might say, indeed, right? They might say, I love the solution, but we can't do it right now. But the amount of time that you spent with them, and that's pretty much what I think is where managers also need to realize, that this is part of either the relationship building process or the brand building process, correct? A relationship is with an existing client, and we need to make this happen, as against doing it with no idea in place, but you're building the brand either as an individual who can be trusted, or as an organization that believes in helping its customer reach their ambitions or aspirations, which I think is very interesting in terms of how you then have. So the reason why I'm saying this is that I was recently talking to a person who had the option of getting a company car, and they were lifelong customers of one particular automotive brand. And essentially what happened was they went in and apparently they had the same pitch, and just for fun's sake, they just went across the street to another, not necessarily directly competing, but another brand, another automotive manufacturer, where the sales approach was completely different, where they started asking about what is the lifestyle, what is this car for, what are you going to be doing with it, right? So essentially, one was a traditional, what features and benefits do you want, and the other one is more talking about aspirations. And of course, needless to say, the other automotive brand was more expensive to begin with. And you already saw that they already knew that the traditional approach was not going to be helping them compete against a good enough competitor. So essentially, I think what you're saying is kind of also rings true in terms of how you need to be talking about aspiration. That works in a B2C level. At the end of the day, it could also work on a B2B level as well.
There's two, if you allow, there's two examples I use to illustrate it. Is one, and that one that you know very well as well. When we teach to executives, we usually, I see my teaching much more as I bring you a model and you use your experience, your case, and try to put it in. So what I say, essentially what I'm doing is I'm just using theory to structure your thoughts. You're not learning anything new. I'm reorganizing your thoughts in your head so that you see, you get new insights. So, and that's the value of an MBA or an executive MBA anyway, is that all that experience now suddenly organized in a way that it's suddenly, wow, I see things. And I often explain to my participants in my courses that that's what we're looking for. You're helping your client to structure their thoughts and to get new aha moments, insights. And you don't have to bring anything other than, well, you bring structure. And so I often bring them that idea, use that. And then the other idea of, metaphor that I use is that a little bit of a psychologist, psychotherapist. People go to the psychotherapist never tells you what you should be doing. They just let you talk. And what's good about it, we want to be listened to. We like to talk and want to be listened to. And when I hear your example of the automotive company, it's also showing empathy, showing that you are genuinely interested in the other person and you just listen to them.
Indeed.
And it's incredible. And I noticed that also in practice, how important and how much that works. Just let the other person talk and listen. And that creates a lot of value because it gives a good feeling.
So in the last two questions for you, Regis, one is very obvious. So what would your suggestions be for salespeople if they have to start deploying or considering design thinking in their approaches?
Okay. So I would say you start looking at which are the clients that are worth it. Okay, because it's going to take some time, and worth it means which ones do I really want to develop the relationship to the next level, because this is really what we're going to be working on. It's the relationship part. Once you've got that, ask those clients, tell them, listen, I'd like to have a meeting, not about selling. We'll be working together for a while. I'd like to know, where do you want to go? And I would like to see how we as a company can help you to get there. Okay, move to the next level. And to do that, I will bring my manager. And I'm quite strong on this, bring your manager. Really, not because he's your manager, but also because you will need two people, one to note and the other one to keep the conversation going, because it's a creative conversation. And it's difficult to do both. Otherwise, it's more of an interview. And you don't want that. It's a conversation. So bring your manager with you, gives a clear signal. Then the next thing that we do, how do you manage that conversation? It's usually start asking them, COVID was an ideal one, a situation in that I said, start by saying, how did COVID affect your business? Immediately start by pushing it out there, how are external elements, and think about best political, economical, social technology. Think about port of 5 forces. What are your competitors doing? What have you seen now with COVID? What did your competitors do? How did your customers react to it? What are you doing on it? Are you doing anything on it? So I use those best and 5 forces as topics to raise questions. So you move the discussion not on the business, but on strategic level. Okay, and let it come. Let it come. See, and okay, and what are you going to do? And when I usually say at the end of the conversation, when you wrote things down, try to go over them with your client and say which one now are for you threats and which are opportunities. Okay, and how does that relate to design thinking? This is all about empathy. The first step, the most important part of design thinking is empathize with your client. Try to put yourself in their shoes and see how they view the world. So what are threats? What are opportunities? What are you doing already about it? And then we can come back in the company. And that's usually how I organize it. Everybody has to come back with their notes, with the threats, the opportunities, what is it? And then we sit with the account team together. And then we do, I call them trigger questions. I say, we ask each question, how might we? And then each threat, how might we help them to alleviate their threats? How might we help them to gain on this opportunity? What are the ideas? So we write them down, and then we do a traditional ideation workshop. And then you filter, of course, which one are the good ones. And you go back with several options to the client, not with one. It's terribly difficult for salespeople. They always want to, I go with one and I'm going to close it. No, go with options. Even though there are some options we prefer, I know. But at least stretch the thinking, And so the next meeting is, look, we've been thinking about it. This is where we believe we can help you. And these are the options that we would like. And then you go again in an interesting creative meeting. But now it starts looking way more familiar because you're going into opportunity management. So that's how we organize it. It's usually 2 meetings. One, the empathy, understand who they are, strategically think with your client, ideate internally with your colleagues. Hey, what could we do? What do we have? And then go back and see what the options that you can have. And then.
So I said 2 things. The last question I have is that what do you recommend to sales organizations and sales managers? Because this can be a time-consuming process, which is time away from going and getting the deal. If you're a publicly listed company, for example, they say, no, my salespeople, because you could even call this almost like servicing your client, or servicing a prospect without getting possibility of a sale. So what recommendations would you make to sales managers and or sales organizations to spur design thinking in your salespeople?
Okay, usually it comes because you experience a problem. The problem is usually that when you go straight and always serve, your competitors are doing the same thing, and the question is, how are we going to make the difference? In our podcast, The Future of Sales, where we had a session, the last one actually. One of the previous people who talked was Ezo Bleker from the Sales Management Association. And one of the things he noticed within the Sales Management Association, he says, everybody is talking about tendering. Customers are doing more and more tenders. It's becoming a much more formal process. So the need to differentiate yourself from your competitor is really strong and needed. So how do we do this? So if you feel that, how are we going to make a difference versus our competitors? Where is the next step? Then design thinking and this approach is really a solution. It's a way to bring the discussion at a different level.
Perfect. Well, Regis, that's all the time we have for. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas and thoughts. This is again a very, very enlightening session as well. So for the audience, again, thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to the next podcast with you as well.
Bye-bye.